As a business analyst, you should always care about the specific values in your data sets, but it can also be illuminating and usually necessary to look for patterns. One way to identify patterns is to count the number of measurements that fall into data ranges called bins. You can then use a type of chart called histograms to track the number of measurements that fall into each bin, yielding useful information about your company's operations. In this movie, I will show you how to create a histogram from a set of data. I'm using the histogram Tableau workbook, which you can find in the Chapter 8 folder of your exercise files collection. My data set here, which comes from a workbook called Visitor Count, contains a single measure, and that is called Count of Visitors, which you can see here in the Measures area. To create my visualization, I will drag Count of Visitors to the Rows area. There you can see, and I have just a simple vertical bar indicating that my count is 4664. But let's say that I want to break the data down into bins, into a histogram. To do that, I can go over to the Show Me palette, and if it isn't currently displayed, go ahead and click its title bar to display it. And then I'll go down and choose the other available visualization for a single measure in the rows area, and that is histogram. So I'll click that, and you can see that Tableau has created a histogram based on the data. If we look at the bins, we can say that they go from 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, and so on. And if we take a look at the counts, we can see that there were between 0 and 9 visitors 10 times. See that there were 12 instances where we had between 10 and 19, 12 between 20 and 19, and so on. I know the range of each bin because the number here that is displayed is the lowest value, and the bin, in this case, I'm dealing with whole numbers, goes up to one below the bin number above it. So this goes from 0 to 9, 10 to 19, and so on. So as you can see, histograms are a great way to look at the distributions of your data. If you run a store and you analyze the number of customers who come in, you can use histogram data to look at frequencies and help you plan the staff that you need to meet customer demand. One of the more recent innovations in data representation is the tree map. Much like a pie chart, tree maps show the relative contribution of parts to a whole. But unlike a pie chart, which uses color to distinguish the parts, a tree map uses both shape size and color shade to represent the part's contribution. In this movie, I will show you how to create a tree map based on data, and my sample file is the tree map Tableau workbook, which you can find in the Chapter 8 folder of the exercise files collection. My data set is very simple. I have a single dimension department and a measure of result. The data summarizes the result for each of 5 departments: balance, dance, play, sport, and work. And some of the results were positive, meaning that there was higher revenue than the previous year, and others are negative, meaning revenue was lower for those departments. To create a tree map, I need to add my data fields to the visualization. So I'll drag results to the data area, and I will drag department to the columns area. So there you can see my result. And if I go over to the Show Me palette, and if it isn't displayed, you can display it by clicking its title bar. Go down to the 4th row and click Tree Map. Doing so displays my data, and you can see that I have 3 values displayed, and I'll hide the Show Me palette so we get a better view. I have balance, which is dark green, and you can see that the result was 150, in this case positive. Play was 100, also positive, and sport was 10, also positive. So once again, we have the intensity of the color representing the share and also the size of the shape. And down at the bottom right, you can see a note indicating that there are 2 negative values. And if you noticed, the range of values goes from -40 to 150. If you want to display negative values as well, Then go over to the side and click the to negative, in this case, link. You'll see a dialog box that says that you can either filter the data and exclude these special values from the view and calculations, or you can use absolute values to determine the size of each of the shapes. I will go ahead and click Use Absolute Values, and when I do, you can see that Tableau adds shapes for work and dance. Work had a result of -40, and dance had a result of -20. Tree maps are a wonderful combination of size and color to communicate the numerical values that you're working with inside of your data sets. Tableau is great at summarizing data visually, but there will be times when you need to add a comment or annotation to a visualization to explain something not communicated directly either by the data or by the visualization. For example, you might only have preliminary sales data for a month and want to tell your colleagues that you plan to update the data behind the chart as soon as the final numbers are available. In this movie, I will show you how to add an annotation or text box to a visualization in Tableau. My sample file is the text box Tableau workbook, and you can find that in the Chapter 9 folder of your exercise files collection. To add a text box or annotation to a Tableau visualization, right-click any empty space on the visualization. So I'll right-click here, and from the shortcut menu that appears, point to Annotate, and then click Area. Doing so opens the Edit Annotation dialog box, and from here you can enter and format the annotation you want to add. So in this case, I'll say data not final until July 1, followed by a period, and I'll select the text. I'll make it a little larger, say go up to 12 point, and I'll make it bold. I could also change the font if I wanted to, add italics or underline, change the color, and I could also left, center, or right align it. But everything looks good for now. I'll just stay with the usual black and click OK. So there is my annotation. It looks good as it is, but let's say that I want to make the box wider. To do that, I can click anywhere in the box, and that displays the handles at the sides and the corners. If you drag a handle on a side, for example this one here, and drag it horizontally, you make the shape wider. If you drag one of the handles on the top or bottom, then you make it either shorter or taller. If you position the mouse pointer over the body of the text box or annotation, and it turns into a four-way pointing arrow, then you can click and drag so that the annotation is in a new place. Dragging one of the corner boxes changes both the height and the width of the text box. And when you're done, just click away to the side, and there it is. If you want to format all of your annotations, for example, if you have multiple annotations in a workbook, go to the Format menu and click Annotations. That opens the Format Annotations task pane over on the side, and you can change your defaults. So the next time you create an annotation, the settings that you have here will be applied. When you create a chart or other visualization in Tableau 9, the program applies its built-in formatting to your creation. As with most every other aspect of a Tableau visualization, you can format your chart's elements to emphasize particular aspects of your data, or just provide the appearance that you want. In this movie, I will show you how to format your chart elements. My sample file is the Format Elements Tableau workbook. You can find that in the Chapter 9 folder of the exercise files collection. I have a simple line chart in this visualization, and let's say that I want to change the color of the line. To do that, I can just click the line, and then on the marks card, I can click the color button. That displays a color palette, and let's say that I want to make the line red. I'll click red, and the color is applied. Clicking away from the palette closes it. I can also change the size of this chart element. So let's say that I click the line, and I currently have this point highlighted. If I want to change the size of the points, I can click the size button and drag to increase the line size. So notice that I didn't increase the size of this particular point. I was increasing the size, or width in this case, of the entire line. I can also add a label. So I'll click the line again, click label, and here you see I can check the show mark labels box. So I'll check that, and you see that the labels appear. And once again, clicking away closes it. You can also format the appearance of the axes. So here I have the vertical axis, which shows the number of sales. If I right-click it, then I get the Edit Axis option at the top of the shortcut menu. So when I click that, I get the Edit Axis dialog box. I can include 0. I can change the range from automatic to a fixed range if I want to. And I can also select other types of data distributions. For example, a reverse distribution or a logarithmic, where each mark on the vertical and horizontal lines represents a power of 10. So it would go 1, 10, 100, 1000, and so on. You'll often see that in scientific work. You can also change the tick marks, making them automatic, fixed, no tick marks, and so on. When you're done, you can either apply your changes and keep going, or click cancel, or click OK. And also, if you want to undo the changes that you've made without applying them, you can just click clear. In this case, I'll click cancel and close the dialog box without making any changes. If I want to format an individual chart element, say for example, this chart element here, this point, I can right-click it, and for example, I can mark the label. I can also use the controls on the Format menu. So for example, if I click the line and click Format, then there are a number of ways that I can change the appearance of this particular line. I can change its shading, change its borders, change its line thickness, for example, or line type. And I can also, if I want, add what are called drop lines. So I'll go ahead and close the Format Lines task pane. One last thing I'd like to show you is how to extend lines from this point here, for example, to both the vertical and horizontal axes. These are called drop lines. So if I right-click the point that's currently labeled 8596, and then go down and point to drop lines, and click Show Drop Lines, then you'll see lines that run from the point over to the vertical and down to the horizontal axes. This type of display is extremely useful if you want to call out one point and you want to show how far it is up or down on the vertical axis and left or right on the horizontal. If you do any sort of economic analysis, then you will often see this type of diagram with drop lines used to describe efficiency frontiers, profit margins, and so on. So as you can see, there are a lot of different ways you can format your chart elements. Add the ones that you want, and don't be afraid to make any changes. Programs that let you create graphs and charts apply built-in color schemes to those charts. In this movie, I will show you how to change the sequence of colors that Tableau applies to your chart elements. My sample file is the Change Sequence Workbook. You can find that in the Chapter 9 folder of your exercise files collection. I have a stacked column chart. It's revenue by day for 5 different departments: balance, dance, play, sport, and work. And you can see the order of the departments. They go in alphabetical order from balance all the way down to work. And let's say that I want to change the order. I want to put, say, work on top. To do that, I can go over to the department card, which is displayed to the left of the visualization, and then drag the color square of the item that I want to move. So I'll put this all the way up at the top above balance, and what I'm doing is clicking and dragging the work purple square up to the top. And when I drop it, you see that it moves up to the top. It's in a new place in the order. And when I clicked away on a blank part of the visualization, the rest of the colors or the rest of the data came back. If I wanted to put dance on the bottom, I could drag dance down to the bottom, and when I click away, I can see my data in my new order. When you analyze time series data using a line chart, you can look into the future mathematically. You do that by creating what is called a trend line. And in this movie, I will show you how to do that. My sample file is the trend line Tableau workbook. You can find that in the Chapter 9 folder of your exercise files collection. I'll hide the Show Me palette by clicking its title bar. And you can see that I have a line that shows daily sales and it shows the trend. What I'd like to do is to add a trend line so that I can see what the trend will look like if it continues into the future. To add the trend line, I'll go to the Analysis menu, point to Trend Lines, and click Show Trend Lines. Tableau actually added 3 lines. I'll describe them. The middle line with the heavy dash is the actual trend line itself. It is the mathematical best fit through the data that created the blue line, and it shows what the data will look like if trends continue into the future. The curved lines above and below the trend line are what are known as error bars. The curved lines indicate what the possible range is for the trending values with about 95% confidence. So you can probably tell with reasonable certainty that the trending values will be somewhere near this line, and with about 95% probability between these two error bars. Do notice, however, that the error lines get further apart the farther away you go from the present. So the more you go into the future, the harder it is to predict. If you want to hide your trend lines, you can go back to the Analysis menu, point to Trend Lines, click Show Trend Lines again, and doing so hides them. One very useful type of visualization that you can create in Tableau is a map. In this movie, I will show you how to format your data so that you can map it using Tableau. The sample file I'll use is the Customer Locations workbook, and you can find it in the Chapter 10 folder of your exercise files collection. This workbook contains a single sheet, and it has a table of data. On it, I have city and state pairs. So I have Portland, Oregon, Redmond, Washington, Carpinteria, California, my hometown of Mount Crawford, Virginia, and so on. What Tableau can do is take this data, which it recognizes as a geographic unit, and turn it into latitude and longitude pairs. Then once you import the data, you can create a map in Tableau. But now let me show you a type of data that won't work, but you might expect it to. I have another file open, so I'll press Alt-Tab and move to it. And this is an Excel workbook called USGS_Quake. USGS is short for United States Geographical Survey, or Geological Survey. This is earthquake data from the year 2014, and it gives the latitude value and the longitude value. So it seems like everything would be great. If you import this data into Tableau, then it could create a map. Unfortunately, the answer is no, it can't. Tableau has a very specific format for the way that it handles geocoded data, so that means that this data actually doesn't work. There is a way to convert this data for use in Tableau, but unfortunately it is very long and involved and outside the scope of this course. So instead, pressing Alt-Tab again, this is the type of data that you will find easiest to work with. You can go for city and state, or you can add zip code, and you can even add street addresses if you want. Creating maps in Tableau 9 is a straightforward process, but there are some quirks to it. So I wanted to take a movie to walk you through the process of creating a map in Tableau. As my sample file, I'll be using the Customer Locations workbook, and you can find that in the Chapter 10 folder of the Exercise Files collection. And as you can see, I've already loaded the data from the Customer Locations Excel workbook, and I have 2 fields, State and City. The stylized globe icon next to those 2 measures indicates that Tableau recognizes them as geographic data. And if we look down in the Measures group, we can see that there are 2 fields, one called Latitude Generated and the other called Longitude Generated. And what that means is that Tableau was able to take my state and city data and generate what are called lat-long or latitude-longitude pairs based on those values. So with that background, let's go ahead and try to map the data. To do that, you need to hold down the Control key and click the fields you want to include. So I'll hold down the Control key and click both state and city. And then I'll go down to the measures group, still holding down the Control key, and click latitude and longitude. And when I do, you might have noticed that the map visualizations in the Show Me panel became available. So I have filled maps and I have symbol maps. Let's go ahead and create a symbol map. That's this icon or button. So I'll click it and Tableau will create my map. It does take a moment. So I can see that I have a number of data points. I have Duluth, Minnesota, Moscow, Idaho, Redmond, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Washington, D.C., and so on. But now with the map created, let's take a look at the data underlying it because there's a few more things I want to point out. I'll go to the Analysis menu and click View Data. And here you can see the sheet for the data that I entered. And there are a couple of things to note. The first is that for Redmond, Washington, we have a latitude and longitude generated. But for Vienna, Virginia, and Mount Crawford, Virginia, and also Quad Cities, Illinois, we don't have any values. They are nulls, which means that they don't appear on the map. That means that for whatever reason, Tableau wasn't able to look up a latitude and longitude value for those locations. It also means they don't appear on the map, and that can be a problem. If you're creating a map and it seems like some points aren't displayed, then you should definitely look at the underlying data. So again, you go to the Analysis menu and click View Data, and you can see which points, if any, haven't been displayed. There are a couple of things that you can try to map these locations in Tableau. The first is to add more information. In the United States, you might use a zip code, whereas outside of the US, you would use a postal code. And also, you might look for a more specific town name. For example, Vienna, Virginia might not return a value, but Tyson's Corner might. So if it's possible that a city or town has a different name or an alternate name, use that. And finally, it is also possible that the location might be an informal name or it might be too small to appear within the database. If that's the case, then understand that some of the points in your data collection might not be mapped. When you're done looking at your data, you can click the close box and go back to working with your map. After you create a map in Tableau, you can change your map's options. And in this movie, I will use the map options sample file, which you can find in the Chapter 10 folder of the exercise files collection, to show you how to change those options. This map contains a listing of cities. We have Duluth, Minnesota, here, Chicago, Illinois, Indianapolis, Moscow, Idaho, Redmond, Washington, Portland, Oregon, and so on. There is a general gray background, which shows bodies of water in white and land masses in gray. And if you want, you can change the map's appearance using Map Options. To display the Map Options task pane, click the Map menu header and click Map Options. That displays the Map Options task pane on the left. One of the things that you can do is change the background or the background style. So for example, we currently have light. If I click the style down arrow and click dark, then I get a darker version of the same background. I can also switch to the normal background, which has land masses such as mountains in green and flatlands in gray. I'll go ahead and switch back to gray, or light in this case. You can also select which map layers to display. So for example, currently we have land cover checked. If I were to clear that checkbox, then you would see that we no longer have any sort of forest or mountains. Instead, what we have is bodies of water. I'll go ahead and bring that back. I can also turn off state borders. So for example, if I clear the state/province borders checkbox, then we don't see the borders. If I check again, they come back. And finally, one very neat thing that you can do is to overlay data collections on your map. So in addition to seeing, in this case, customer locations, you can see information about the US and the people within it. To display those data layers, which are drawn from free public data sources, click the Layer Controls down arrow and select what you want. Let's say in this case that I want to look at household income median. So I'll click that under US households. And adding that data layer tells me where different income levels exist. And you see the groups are 39,000 to 44,300, and so on. Adding data layers and changing the style of the background of your map are two of many options that you can change. I encourage you to explore and find the ones that work best for your visualization. When you manage all or part of an organization, it is absolutely vital that you have the information you need at your fingertips. In Tableau, you can bring information that you need into a single place by creating a dashboard. And in this movie, I will use the Create Dashboard Sample Workbook, which you can find in the Chapter 10 folder of your exercise files collection. Creating a dashboard brings the various worksheets into a single place. This workbook contains 4 worksheets: product state, state tree map, by state, and by category. And what I want to do is to bring the data, or all these visualizations, into a single dashboard. To create a dashboard, go up to the Dashboard menu and click New Dashboard. I've created my dashboard, and now I can drag my various worksheets onto the body of the dashboard. So I'll just bring over product state and drop it, and then state tree map. I'll put it there. And I will add my by state bar graph. So put that here. And by category, my pie chart, which I'll put down here. So there I have all of my different items. And if I hide the Show Me panel, you can see that I also have my legends over here on the right. So for my tree map, I have quantity going from 75 to 510. And for product category, I have my legend. So blue is balance, orange is dance, and so on. So there is all of my data. It's in a nice 2x2 arrangement with all 4 items. The authors of Tableau Your Data, which is a book I recommend, and I also mention in the Further Resources movie, they recommend that you have a dashboard with at most 4 elements, and that is what I have here. Creating a dashboard is a fairly straightforward process, but I think you'll find it to be extremely useful. After you create a dashboard in Tableau, you can change some of its options so it fits your needs more effectively. I'm working in the Dashboard Elements workbook, and you can find that in the Chapter 10 folder of your exercise files collection. I'll display the dashboard by clicking the Dashboard 1 Worksheet tab. And here you see that I have 4 elements: a tree map, a vertical bar graph or column chart, a table that shows the state of sales for each of my 5 departments, and also a pie chart showing sales by category. This dashboard is optimized for a computer monitor, and while the dashboard is active, you can see that over here on the right there is the dashboard task pane. I have the available sheets. I can also add images, make horizontal or vertical splits, add text, and so on. And at the bottom of the task pane is the size control, which I can click to change the size of the dashboard. Right now it's set for desktop at 1000 by 800, but let's say that I want a smaller dashboard that's 800 by 600. That would be used for, say, a travel laptop. I can go up and click laptop, and when I do, my dashboard gets resized. Note that everything within the dashboard stayed within the same proportion. It's just that the resolution or the number of pixels allotted to the dashboard declined. If I want, I can also type in specific values. Instead of 800 by 600, I could make it whatever I wanted. I can make it taller than wide, for example. If I want to resize an element, I can hover the mouse pointer over that element, such as perhaps this pie chart, and you can see that there are borders around it. So if I want to make my pie chart wider, I have my horizontal arrow, so I can just click and drag, And you can see it there. And I'll do the same to make it taller. And now my pie chart is larger. And finally, if I want to display a title for this dashboard, I can go down to the bottom of the dashboard task pane and check the Show Title box. There I have my title Dashboard 1. If I double-click it, I get the Edit Title box. It currently has the sheet name, which is Dashboard 1. I'll delete that field, and I'll type State Emphasis, and click OK. And when I do, I get my new title. Dashboards are extremely useful. I think you'll find a lot of ways to add needed data to them and also to format them so they meet your needs exactly. Dashboards provide an overview of your organization. That means they can summarize a lot of data. If you want to filter your data across your dashboard rather than sheet by sheet, you can use one of the fields as a global filter. In this movie, I will use the global sample file to show you how to create a global filter. You can find the global sample file, a Tableau workbook, in the Chapter 10 folder of your exercise files collection. So I have a dashboard with 4 different displays. I have a tree map for state, sales by state, broken out by category, and then also products or department. And what I'd like to do is to create a filter that I can apply to all 4 sheets that I have. I want to filter by product category. The first thing I need to do is define my filter. So I'll go to the By Category control and click in its body. That provides an outline of this particular element. I'll click its down arrow, and I'll click Use as Filter. This is the first step to making sure that I can filter based on category or department. Now I'll click the down arrow again, point to Quick Filters, and I can now select what I want to use as my filter criteria, and that will be product category. And you can see that a product category filter appeared over on the right side of the dashboard. Now I need to tell Tableau that I want to filter the entire dashboard, all worksheets that are displayed on it that come from the same data source, using these controls here in the new product category filter that appeared. So I'll click that control. Again, that outlines it and highlights it. Click the down arrow, and I'll go up to the top and point to Apply to Worksheets, and make sure that all using this data source is selected. You might see only this worksheet or selected worksheets, but this is the option you want, all using this data source. So regardless of which is selected, go ahead and click all using this data source. And you can now use the filter control you created to filter all of the worksheets that are displayed in this dashboard. So the first thing I'll do is clear the All checkbox, and you can see that all of my data goes away. And then I'll check the Sport box and check the Work box. There you can see that my filter has been applied globally, and I'm seeing only results for the Sport and the Work departments. If I want to remove the filter, I can hover my mouse pointer over the filter control and click the Clear Filter button, which will show all the values. And when I do that, all of my data is restored. Global filters help you narrow the focus of your dashboards. When you're done filtering your data, you can remove the filter from the key sheet, and all of your data will return. Thanks again for working through Tableau 9 Essential Training. I hope you've gotten a lot out of the course and that you can use Tableau to facilitate business decisions. I'd like to point out a few further resources so you can continue learning about the program. The first is the Tableau software website, and that is www.tableau.com. The Tableau software site has a lot of tutorials, knowledge base articles, and so on, so you'll be able to see what other folks have done with Tableau and apply what they've learned to your own work. Next, there are 2 books that I think you'll be interested in. The first is called Tableau Your Data by Daniel G. Murray, that's from Wiley, and it's a really solid introduction to Tableau, and I think it works extremely well as a complement to this course. That's also true with Rapid Graphs with Tableau Software 8 by Eileen McDaniel and Stephen McDaniel. That book is from A Press. And yes, it is for Tableau version 8, but a lot of what you learn there will apply to version 9 and hopefully subsequent versions. Once again, thanks. I hope that working through Tableau 9 Essential Training has been rewarding, and I wish you good luck with the program.